let's get into the video. Alright, so today we are going to go deep on one of the most interesting people ever, George Washington. Now, this ain't your grandma's history lesson. We're going to talk about who he really was, what he did, and why he matters to us today. In 1732, in a tiny house on a Virginia plantation, a baby boy was born. They named him George Washington. Now, I know what you're thinking. So what? Another rich kid born into privilege, right? Wrong. You see, George didn't have it easy. He lost his dad before he was even 2, and then his mom remarried. And let me tell you, his stepfather was no saint. He treated George like a servant, not a son. Can you imagine the future president of the United States doing chores instead of playing with toys? It made George Washington the man we'll meet later. It made him strong, independent, and self-reliant. Now, let's talk about that famous story about the cherry tree. You know, the one where young George couldn't tell a lie and chopped down a tree and then told his father what he had done. Well, some historians say it's just a story. But if you ask me, it shows us how important honesty was to George. Okay, enough about the backstory. Let's get to the action because things are about to get real. Imagine being a blacksmith, working hard all day, making tools and weapons for the American Revolution. You're tired, sweaty, covered in grime. Then who shows up but George Washington himself, looking sharp in his fancy military uniform. He walks right up to you and asks for a gun. Easy, right? Just hand it over. Well, hold on. He doesn't have any money. And if you're a soldier without your weapon, you're in big trouble. So what does George do? He promises to pay you back, but not with money. He offers something better, a chance to fight for freedom. He recruits that blacksmith and many others, igniting a fire that will change the course of history. Washington was a master of turning the weak into the mighty. He took ordinary people, farmers, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, and showed them that together they could beat the biggest empire on earth. He led them through years of hardship and sacrifice, showing courage that inspired those around him. When the odds were stacked against them, Washington never gave up. At Valley Forge, in the winter of 1747, his troops were outnumbered, outgunned, and freezing. But Washington kept pushing, training, and drilling his men until they were ready to win. It was a test of endurance, and Washington and his troops came out stronger on the other side. In the end, they won against all odds. And when the British came asking for surrender, guess what Washington said? Never. Surrender. He fought for freedom, and by God, he would have independence or die trying. And let's be real. That's some serious motivation right there. Now, I know what you're thinking. George Washington, legendary hero. What could possibly be wrong with that picture? Well, here's the thing. Washington wasn't perfect. He owned slaves. And during his time, slavery was legal and accepted. But let me tell you, it was a problem. See, owning slaves went against everything Washington stood for. Freedom and equality. It was a contradiction that bothered him. But he struggled with what to do about it. You see, he knew that ending slavery would cause pain and division. And given the choice between keeping the peace or fighting for justice, he chose peace. In the end, he freed his slaves in his will, but he didn't push for change on a national level. And that's something to think about. Our heroes aren't always perfect. Sometimes they make tough choices that we might not agree with. But that doesn't mean their fight for freedom wasn't real. But let's get back to the story. After winning the war, Washington was a celebrity. People wanted him to be king, but he had other plans. He didn't want a king, he wanted a president. And that's exactly what he became in 1789, the first president of the United States. But don't get the wrong idea. There were no votes, no political parties, no debates. It was unanimous. They just trusted him to lead. That's the kind of respect he earned. As president, he set the tone for the country, showing what a leader should be like. He picked the first cabinet members, established how the president's office would work, and laid the foundation for the two-term tradition. Plus, he dealt with tricky situations like the Whiskey Rebellion, showing that the new government was serious about enforcing laws. And let's not forget about setting precedents. Washington set the bar high for presidents to come. He showed what it meant to be a leader, both in words and deeds. And he was like the architect of the presidency, shaping it into something great. And after 8 years, he decided it was time to pass the torch. He didn't want to be a king, and he sure as hell didn't want to be an emperor. He wanted to be George Washington, the man who left it all to build a nation. Now I know what you're thinking. Why should I care about this guy? He's long gone. Well, here's the thing, Washington's story isn't just about the past. It's about what his legacy means to us today. He showed us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. He taught us about leadership, courage, integrity, honesty, and public service. These are lessons we need now more than ever. Take, for example, that time when he called for unity. Back in 1783, when the war was still raging, Washington gathered his troops for one last battle. In his speech, he talked about how the war had been tough, but it was about to end. He urged everyone to move forward together, putting the past behind him. He didn't dwell on the hatred and anger of the war. Instead, he focused on the future, calling for national unity and reconciliation. It was a powerful message that stayed with people for years to come. And let's not forget about that time when he honored the British. Believe it or not, after the war, Washington threw a party. Not just any party, a victory celebration. But guess who he invited? British officials. You heard that right. He wanted to heal the wounds of war and move forward. It wasn't easy, but Washington made it happen. He recognized the importance of showing respect and dignity even to those they had fought against. Speaking of moving forward, remember that time when he welcomed the French? During the war, France had been a big help, sending troops and supplies to support the Americans. And when the war was over, Washington wanted to show them some love. He planned a massive parade in New York City, complete with a grand dinner for French King Louis XVI. It was a way to honor their alliance and friendship. But here's the best part. He also invited former enemies from the Iroquois Confederacy. This grand gesture was a symbol of unity and reconciliation. It showed that he wasn't just interested in celebrating the victory, but in building a better future for everyone. So why does Washington's story matter to us today? Well, in a world that often feels divided, his story reminds us of the power of unity. In a time of political tension and conflict, his actions offer a beacon of hope for healing and reconciliation. Whether it's environmental challenges, economic crises, or social issues, his legacy inspires us to come together and tackle any obstacle. And let's not forget the times when our values are challenged. In a world where greed and corruption sometimes seem like the norm, Washington's story reminds us to stay true to our principles. It encourages us to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. It challenges us to be honest, humble, and dedicated to the common good. And finally, in a world that can often feel overwhelming and uncertain, Washington's story gives us hope. His journey from a young surveyor to the leader of a nation shows us that extraordinary things are possible. It reminds us that with courage, determination, and a commitment to justice, we can build a better future for ourselves and future generations. In the end, George Washington wasn't just a president. He was a symbol of hope. He showed us that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things and that leaders should be honest, humble, and dedicated to their country. His story continues to inspire us today, encouraging us to unite, to be courageous, and to keep striving for a better future. So thank you, George Washington, for showing us the way. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you love these sorts of stories, subscribe and stay tuned for more historical tales.